Girl of Ancient Civilization. Book 1 of the Ëlanari Tales. Brought to you by Ashenheart. Chapter 13. The Commander. Darren fought the way a mountain fights a river, by being there. No wasted motion. His bastard sword came in heavy and straight, full shoulder behind each strike. He didn't hurry. Kael parried the first strike, and the impact ran through his arms like a hammer blow, numbing his fingers to the second knuckle. The edge binding on his blade flickered, a weak rune drawn in the dark. Darren's plain steel met his inscribed steel, and the plain steel didn't care. He gave ground. One step, two. The circle of soldiers tightened behind him, not attacking, just walls. Darren's second strike came from the left, a diagonal cut aimed at Kael's wounded shoulder. The parry worked, barely. The knife hilt pressed against his palm.
"You're good,"
Darren said. Conversational.
"Better than I expected. The ledger doesn't usually produce fighters worth talking to."
He struck again. A faint high, Kael committed to the parry, and the real attack came low, the bastard's sword reversing impossibly fast for a blade that heavy. The tip caught Kael's left arm, opening a line from elbow to wrist, deliberate. "I can cut you wherever I want." Kael countered. A thrust at Darren's chest, fast, committed. Darren turned it on the flat of his blade without changing his stance.
"The girl trained for 3 weeks.
Darren said.
The crying, the shaking, that was real, by the way. She does actually feel things. I just taught her how to use them."
He struck, a horizontal sweep that Kael ducked under, his wounded leg screaming as he dropped his weight.
The food in her pocket was a nice touch. My idea. People trust someone who feeds them.
Kael came up from the duck and swung. The edge binding was almost gone, the rune dissolving along the blade. His sword caught Darren's armor at the side and skidded along scarred leather. Darren didn't flinch. He stepped inside Kael's reach, too close for a full swing, and drove his elbow into Kael's wounded ribs. The world went white, then red. Kael staggered. His left leg buckled, and he caught himself on one knee. Blood from his stomach pooled beneath him. The knife handle was slick in his grip. The torchlight narrowed to a tunnel. Darren stood over him, the bastard's sword resting on his shoulder.
"Stay down, boy,"
he said, low, almost kind.
"You've got nothing left."
The sword came up, a killing strike, overhead, two-handed. Lira was behind Kael. He couldn't see her, but he could feel the inscriptions, a faint vibration in the air around her. The sword reached its apex. The firelight painted Darren in orange and black, the scar, the hands like shovels gripping the hilt. Kael looked at the blade above him, and something shifted. A pressure in the space around his body, in the air between his skin and the world, something he'd been feeling his entire life, behind his breastbone, in the half-second of impossible speed that had saved him at the stream and the ambush and a dozen fights before, moved, like will. He listened. Chapter 14. The Storm. The air moved. Something that had been coiled inside him since before he could remember, surfacing only in fragments. The dodge too fast, the wrongness in the forest he'd called intuition. He stopped asking, stopped thinking. He pushed. The air around him compressed, dust lifted from the ground, fine gray particles, rising in slow spirals. The flames of the nearest fire pit bent sideways, guttered, bent further. A soldier's torch flickered and snapped. The grass in the courtyard beyond the camp pressed flat, radiating outward from Kael. Darren's sword came down. The air caught it. A resistance. The blade met something between itself and Kael's skull, and the killing stroke that should have split him from crown to sternum deflected. Not much, 2 inches, maybe 3. And the bastard's sword bit into the ground beside Kael's knee with a crack that sent stone chips flying. 2 inches. Darren's eyes changed. Darren had not been surprised by anything before. Now his dark eyes widened.
Vain script.
He said, one word, flat. Kael rose. He didn't stand up. He was lifted by the air. It gathered beneath him and around him and through him, and his body responded the way a sail responds to wind. He came to his feet too smooth and too fast. The air was with him now, the fires bending, the torches flickering, the dust turning in slow helixes. He raised his sword. The edge binding was dead. The rune was ash-gray, spent. When he swung, the air carried the blade, accelerated it, extended its reach, added a weight that had nothing to do with steel. The first strike came at Darren fast enough that the older man barely got his guard up. Steel met steel. The air screamed between them, a sound like tearing cloth. Darren staggered one step backward, the first he'd taken in the fight. Kael pressed. A second strike, overhead, mimicking Darren's killing blow, but faster, pushed by the wind. Darren caught it on the flat of his bastard sword and his arms buckled. A third strike. Kael sidestepped on a wounded leg that shouldn't bear weight, the air cushioning the damaged muscle, carrying him 3 feet to the left. His sword came from an angle Darren hadn't covered, and the blade caught the older man's shoulder. The scarred leather split. Blood, Darren's blood, the first Kael had drawn, ran dark down his arm. Darren's eyes were fully open now, both of them staring at Kael.
Well,
Darren said, and adjusted. He came in harder. The bastard sword moved with 20 years of muscle memory and a blade heavy enough to break bones through a parry. He aimed for Kael's wounded side where the knife was still embedded. The air deflected the strike, partially, enough to turn a killing blow into a glancing one, but the impact still landed, Darren's blade skating along Kael's ribs, opening a new cut over the old one, and the pain was a white explosion that nearly broke his concentration. Nearly. The air wavered, flickered, like a flame in a draft. Kael was bleeding faster now, stomach wound, leg wound, both open. Something deeper than inscription energy was burning through him. He had seconds. Darren knew it. The older man's eyes were calculating again. Kael couldn't. He didn't try to win. Darren was better than him. Older, stronger, more experienced, unwounded. He slammed his palm into the ground. The air exploded. Everywhere. In every direction simultaneously, a detonation of compressed atmosphere that turned the camp into a hurricane. Dust, ash, dead leaves, loose equipment, all of it ripped from the ground and hurled into a cyclone that swallowed the clearing in seconds. The fires went out, all 3, snuffed. The torches followed, torn from hands, extinguished, flung into the dark. The horses at the north line screamed and reared, tearing at their pickets. Tent canvas snapped and ripped. A supply crate toppled and burst. Visibility dropped to nothing. The air was a wall of gray-brown particulate, spinning, roaring. Soldiers stumbled, coughed, covered their faces. Darren stood in it, his feet planted, his sword raised, his eyes squinting against the assault of dust and ash. Kael grabbed Lira. She was there, right behind him, where she'd been the whole time. Her hand found his in the dark, small, cold, gripping with a strength that a 10-year-old shouldn't have. They ran. Through the storm and the blind chaos of soldiers and screaming horses and canvas tearing, Kael's leg was fire and his stomach was a slow-motion catastrophe, and his body was running on something that wasn't blood or adrenaline but the raw, burning residue of power he'd never known he had. The wind helped. It pushed at their backs, cleared the debris from their path, bent the air around them into a corridor of relative calm while the camp behind them dissolved into blind fury. They hit the tree line. The camp noise faded. Shouts, the clatter of equipment, a horse's scream. The forest closed around them, dark and dense. Behind them, in the settling dust, a figure stood. Broad, unhurried, brushing ash from scarred leather armor with one hand, the bastard's sword still in the other. Darren looked at the place where Kael had been, the flattened grass, the circle of destruction.
That was new.
He said. He didn't pursue. Not yet. He had men to reassemble, horses to calm, a camp to rebuild, and the quarry was gut-stabbed and bleeding. The forest swallowed them. Kael ran until he couldn't run, then walked until he couldn't walk, then stumbled until the stumbling became a kind of controlled falling that was only upright because the trees kept catching him. Lira was beside him. Her hand had found his arm and stayed there, not for support, connection. The wind still moved with them, barely, a whisper of what it had been, a faint pressure at his back, a slight ease in the air ahead. His hand was pressed to his stomach. The knife was still there. He hadn't pulled it, hadn't dared. The bleeding around it was steady and dark and warm. His ribs were open again. The arm cut was shallow but bleeding. The leg was the worst. Each step a negotiation with a muscle that had been cut and was done negotiating. The trees thinned. The ground changed, from root-knotted forest floor to grass. Open ground. He could feel the sky above him wide and dark and full of stars that he couldn't see because his vision was tunneling, narrowing, the edges going gray. The forest ended. An open field stretched ahead, grass, silver in the starlight, rolling gently toward a horizon he couldn't reach. Kael took 3 more steps into the grass. Then his legs stopped. Just stopped. One moment walking, the next moment not. He went to his knees, then to his side, then to his back. Grass beneath him, stars above. Lira's face appeared, pale, sharp, framed by her dark hood. Her eyes were the last clear thing in a world that was dissolving at the edges.
Kael,
She said. He tried to answer. His mouth moved. No sound came out. He was dying. 4 wounds, blood loss, exhaustion. The air magic had burned through whatever reserves his body had been hiding. Just grass, and stars, and a girl's face.
Out of the firelight a shadow came, broad as a tower and slow as stone, with a bastard sword that knew no mark, and a scar for a crown on his weathered bone. Thine own folks sent me, the shadow said, the ledger whose bread he ate so long. They gave me thy name and they gave me thy road, and they paid for this hour with a betraying song. Wind against a mountain, wind against a mountain. The boy was air and the man was stone, and the one had trained since he was a child, and the other knew not what he'd been shown. Wind against a mountain, the southwood rose with the ruined belt, and his hands were red and his sword was slow, and the mountain came with a patient swing, and the blood ran down where the gut wound showed. Stay down, boy, the mountain said. Stay down and live and child. But the wind at his back began to wake, and the air remembered what it had filed. Wind against a mountain, wind against a mountain. The boy was air and the man was stone, and the one had trained since he was a child, and the other knew not what he'd been shown. Wind against a mountain. Did lift and the fire did bow, and the torches went like a snuffed out breath, and the mountain strike was turned aside by the hand of a wind long thought to death. And he rose and his blade met the bastard sword, with an air between them like a hidden door. And the mountain's eyes grew wide at last, for he'd never seen such a thing before. Wind against a mountain, wind against a mountain. The boy was air and the man was stone, and the one had trained since he was a child, and the other knew not what he'd been shown. Wind against a mountain. He slammed his palm on the beaten ground, and the air exploded as a storm released, and the camp went blind in a cloak of dust. And he took the child, and he ran to the east. Wind against a mountain,